Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joshua Boatman, and I'm the Regional Technology Director for the Ohio Valley region. In today's afternoon command training, we are going to talk about from contact to close. So the idea behind this training is going to be to kind of give you a quick overview of the needed steps to take basically to take a contact, a lead, someone that whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, and take them through the entire process, mostly within Command and utilizing Docusign to process your transaction, to submit it for compliance, as well as to submit your commission request. It is designed to be an overview. We're not going to kind of get into too much of the nitty-gritty details, especially if you're going back and forth with like counter offers and things like that, to try to keep this as abbreviated as possible. So just kind of keep that in mind. But of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself. Use the chat if that makes the most sense. Sometimes I get talking and I forget about the chat. So if you ask a question and I kind of pretend I don't see it, or it seems like I'm ignoring it, it could be because I just am not paying attention, or it's a really hard question that I'm hoping you're going to forget. Beyond that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which is always the tough part because sometimes it works. And I'm hoping everyone can see my screen. If not, say something in the chat, yell at me. If I don't hear from you, I'm going to assume we're good to go. So as you can see, we're kind of logged in here into Command. And there's a couple quick things that I always kind of like to talk about housekeeping wise. When we talk about, especially the doing a transaction from within Command. So we're going to train on, and we're going to use Docusign as our transaction management system. We like Docusign. We have a relationship with Docusign. Command does support the utilization of .loop. If you're one of those people that are still using .loop, boo, hate .loop, boo, Boozilla, right? Maybe. I'm just kidding, sort of. But it'll function very similar, at least on the compliance side. And I'll kind of try to point out some of those steps along the way. In addition, one of the key things we want to make sure that when we're trying to utilize Command, especially for our compliance and our commissions, that we always want to make sure that we start the transaction from within Command first. So, and I'll kind of mention that as we kind of go through that process and we reach that step. But basically, that means don't create your .loop loop or your Docusign room ahead of time and have your client sign things. We want to start that creation process from within Command, and specifically from within opportunities. So that'll make a little bit more sense once we get further into the class, but I just kind of always want to point those things out. So when we talk about Command, the first thing I always want to jump into and mention is in the upper left-hand corner, we have the red KW. And if we click on this, it's going to reveal the names of all the applets. If you're not quite sure which applets, are which based upon the picture, if you expand hit the red KW, it actually expands each applet's name. So that way, if you're more of a word person versus a visual person, that can kind of guide you along the way. We are going to talk mostly in the opportunities applet, which if you didn't know, this is actually, I believe, two people shaking hands. It took me a while to figure that out, but it's two people shaking hands. They just got a really short thumb here. And we're going to gloss into the contacts applet just ever so slightly. And part of the reason we need to talk about contacts is whenever creating an opportunity within Command, when you want to start that transaction within Command, you're starting to create, fill out your pipeline. You want to make sure that you have a contact first. You cannot create an opportunity without a contact. That is the prerequisite, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just quickly walk through the contact creation process. We're not going to spend too long on this, but I just want to show you how quick and easy it is. So to do that, we're going to jump into contacts. And this is going to take you into your contact list. So depending on what we're wanting to do, so in this case, we're going to create a contact. We're going to click Add Contact in the upper right-hand corner, and it's going to bring up our Add to Contacts modal. So the only thing that is absolutely required when creating a contact is the full name. You don't need any other information. highly recommend that at least you add the primary email and the primary phone. For our purposes with opportunities, it's always a great idea to have the name and the email, because that will help you when sending things out for signatures via the e-transaction platforms. So I'm going to quickly create a contact, and I'm going to create Frodo Baggins because I watched Lord of the Rings this weekend, and I'm just going to throw in an email for Frodo here. And that's pretty much it. We add the contact, Frodo's name, his email. We're going to click create, and it's going to easily create this contact. We can kind of come in here. We can type in Frodo's name and we can find him. That's all it takes. Is really simple. You have to have this contact in first before we can create that opportunity. So it's just that quick and simple. Now, we could create an opportunity from within the contact. So if we're in Frodo's contact, we could come over here to opportunities and we could click the create opportunity button, and this will bring up the opportunities modal. Now, the benefit of doing it this way, you're going to notice that it automatically assigns Frodo to this opportunity. If we go into the opportunities applet on the left-hand side, the two shaking hands, right? If we click on this, this is going to take us into the opportunity screen, and we can create an opportunity from within here by clicking the create opportunity button. The difference is if we do it from within opportunities, we have to search for Frodo. But before we actually jump into that process of creating an opportunity, I want to kind of walk you through what we're seeing on this screen. Now, we have an opportunities class that we kind of go through opportunities more in depth, but I kind of just want to give you some context on what you're seeing. So within opportunities, we have 3 pipelines, and each pipeline has 5 phases. So, and these are the standard phases of any transaction within real estate, right? Probably any transaction if you think about it in general. But you have your cultivate phase, right? And that's the same across for listings, for buyers, and for leases. Keeping in mind, leases would not only represent people that are leasing properties, but the actual landlords as well, right? So the renters and the landlords would all kind of fit within leases. But there's 5 phases, right? You have your cultivate. That is where, you know what, you're growing that relationship. They haven't really made any kind of commitment one way or the other. So cultivate leads to appointment, where they schedule that appointment. If it's a listing, right, it's going to be a listing appointment to maybe, display and, and showcase what you're going to do for them as the listing agent. Buyers, right, it's that buyer appointment. Then once you get that deal signed and it's active and you're showcasing that listing, it goes to the active, and then active will go to under contract once it's written. And once you have an accepted offer, which is in this market, like literally 30 seconds after you put it out on the MLS, right? It's probably, $100,000 above asking. It's an amazing time to sell real estate. Terrible time to buy real estate. But, and then of course, onto the close. So these phases are going to play a key part during this class, because I'm going to kind of mention as we kind of walk through some of those. Now, within each phase, we do have stages. So for instance, if I were to jump into the cultivate phase, here you can see that I have watch, nurture, hot. If I were to jump into the appointment phase, I have scheduling, scheduled, kept. Right, active, here we have staging, showing, negotiations, and then a random stage name that I created for some class. You cannot customize phases, but you can add as many stages to a phase as you want. And I kind of just mentioned that just a little bit, just, it kind of makes sense as I reference it throughout the class. So let's go ahead and let's create an opportunity. So I'm going to click create an opportunity in the upper right-hand side, and we're going to kind of walk through this modal real quick. Under Market Center, you're generally only going to see one Market Center. The only time you may see multiple Market Centers is if you're transitioning from one Market Center to another. You may have some opportunities associated with the previous Market Center, and then you can also create opportunities for your current Market Center, right? To the right, team would only be if you're a member of a team. If you are not a member of a team, there's not even going to be anything within this dropdown. Here you can see I have a team, the Josh Boatman Group. I know it's very creative. I actually am thinking of changing it to Team Thundercats. So be prepared for that for my next class at one point. And then the big thing I want to point out as well is this opportunity type. I want you to notice that whenever we create an opportunity, by default, it does automatically select it as a listing opportunity. As we mentioned, there are 3 pipelines, but there are 4 opportunity types. Listings go to the listing pipeline, right? Buyers go to the buyer's pipeline, right? Not that complicated. Landlord, tenant, both go to the leases. I want you to make note of this, that you make sure you're always selecting the right opportunity type, because once you create an opportunity, you cannot move it in between pipelines. So said another way, if you create a listing opportunity, but you actually meant for it to be a buyer opportunity, we cannot switch it from listing to buyer. You either have to just archive it out within listing and start over within buyers, or just kind of deal with it that it's going to be a little weird when it comes to your stats. The production would be the same for the most part, but just where that production came from can be a little hinky at that point. So I just kind of want to make sure you are in fact aware of that. So for our class, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to create a listing opportunity. And then you'll notice, since I did not create that contact from within Frodo, or that opportunity from within Frodo's contact, I need to do a search for him. So there he is. And then you're going to see that there's the opportunity name. Now, this is automatically generated for you. Here you can see what it did. It took the opportunity type and the client's name, and that's what it named it. Pretty simple. If this is a listing, which in fact this is, we want to make sure a good rule of thumb is going to be to plug in the listing address, then maybe the client's name, right? And that's just going to make it easier on you as you're searching through all your different opportunities, that you know what opportunity this is associated with. Frodo, for instance, could have multiple listings going on at once, and we're going to create multiple opportunities. This is how we can make sure that we still have the appropriate opportunity and we know what we're looking at when we identify it. Another thing to keep in mind with your opportunity name, that when we later use command to create that Docusign room, or that .loop, if you choose to continue to use .loop, that will automatically name the loop and or the room, whatever the opportunity name is. So when I create my room later, it is actually going to be called 6055 Shaw Road -Frodo Baggins. If I were creating a .loop, it's going to be named just that. Custom tags, we're not going to dive too deep into, but this would be a way for you to identify certain things about a transaction depending upon your needs. Some people have used this to track lead sources. Some people have used this to track the title companies. Is a lawyer involved? Where's the earnest money? You could create custom tags based upon that and use color codes to kind of track at a glimpse what you're doing. The estimated close date, of course, would be, hey, when do you think this thing's going to close? We're creating an opportunity. It's not a required field, so we're just going to leave it blank. While estimated listing price is not a required field, I always recommend, if nothing else, even before you know what the listing price is, you can later adjust this, but I would always put a value in there, because that's going to play a part in the generation of your potential income and your probable income at the end of the pipeline. Without any value here, you won't actually see any probable income, because 100% of zero is still zero, right? So we're going to go ahead and do 450,000. Commission rate is required. Now this can be changed later. And so keep in mind, this is going to be what your commission off of the deal is. This isn't going to be what you may list it at 6% and you get 3% and the buyer's agent gets 3%. This is going to be what you're going to get. We'll do 3. And then down here below is where you can see the phase and then the stage within each phase. So here you can see by default, it takes us to the cultivate phase. And then within that, we mentioned it, right? Watch, nurture, hot. You can skip phases when creating an opportunity. If you don't need it in the cultivate phase and you already have the appointment, you already know that you're getting it, like maybe you know Frodo and he's your brother or he's your neighbor, and you're just going to move into the active phase, you can absolutely do that. But I want you to note, you can only create something within the first 3 phases. You cannot automatically create an opportunity under contract or directly into under contract or closed, and that's by design. So let's go ahead and let's just do active. Why not? And then we'll just say it's in the staging stage. We're going to go ahead and click create. So this is going to take us into the the opportunity itself. So within an opportunity, we have a couple tabs across the top. Real quick, the details. These are going to be the nitty gritty things of the opportunity, right? This is where we can kind of come through. We can change the opportunity name if we want to. We can adjust our commission from within here. If there's some additional information you want to display, we can do that as well. If we want to change the listing price, all that good stuff. This is also where at a later date, we could go through and we can select the property. So if we were to go ahead and type this in, you know, especially since it's a listing, we kind of know what it is. So we're going to look for Shaw Road, right? This is going to be information that is going to be used for other stages of this transaction, especially information that can get filled over into Docusign or .loop. If this is a buyer, you may not know the property information yet, right? You don't know what they're offering or what they're going to be writing on. So you can leave that blank for now. We'll just go ahead and hit save. Pretty simple. If we want to change the name of an opportunity, it's as simple as hitting the pencil and then opportunity name right here. If for some reason we associated this opportunity with the wrong contact name, we can change it here. Or if Frodo has a partner that they are also listing this property with, if we have them added to our contacts in command, we could add them to this as well. Some additional information you can see on this screen. Time frame would be, you know, hey, when do you think it's going to sell? Potentially, mostly this is going to be tied more to like the cultivate, right? So you can have an idea of what maybe the time frame within transactions, your estimated close date, your appointment scheduled. These dates are in fact important. This is a lot of these dates are used for tracking your conversion rates within command. So if you've ever set your goals within command, you've said, hey, I want to make an X amount of dollars this year. Command will help you figure out based upon your conversion rates, how many appointments, how many, clients, how many leads you need to generate to reach those goals. We're not going to dig too deep into this. We do go over this in detail within the reports and goals class that we offer every other Friday. So I think that might be not this Friday, but next Friday. So if you're interested in that, make sure you sign up for that. And of course, our estimated list price and our commission, right? Pretty simple. So as we kind of move across the top, we're going to talk about seller profile real quick. So what is the seller profile? This would be used if you have Frodo or your buyer, right? Your seller, your buyer, if they're tied and registered with your app and or website. Within that, you have the ability to do a custom buyer's guide and seller's guide. We talk a little bit about that within our consumer training on one of our regional classes that we do. So if you want more information, dig into that. We're not going to talk too much about this, but it basically allows you to build a custom guide, a custom checklist for them as your client to kind of go through. You can see what they've checked off, what you have checked off, and vice versa. Documents, this is going to be the compliance section. This is where we are going to start our transaction to create our Docusign room or our .loop. This is where our compliance checklist comes into play, where we can add documents in. This is where you're really going to see the value of making sure that you're starting these transactions, these rooms and these loops from within command, because it's going to make your life so much easier to bring documents into command for compliance. Offers and commissions, just kind of quickly run through this. This is where when we have an offer, we are going to create it within here. There's some really cool things that I'll show you later at the end of this class if we have some time on how you can compare multiple offers with your clients, which is a huge, huge thing. You want to make sure you have a process in place for that. This is also where you're going to submit your commission request to make sure you're getting paid when the thing closes. So we're going to kind of go through that process just so you kind of understand some of the nuances with that. Notes are just going to be any notes that pertain specifically to the transaction. I talk quickly about notes just because I want you guys to understand the difference between notes within an opportunity and notes within a contact. You know, when you add a note to Frodo's contact within the contacts applet, those should be notes that aren't transaction specific. Those should be notes that are client specific, things that you want to add to make sure that your relationship with Frodo is as complete as possible, right? Information that you may want to know, like maybe his sister's name, his brother's name, his wife's name, his dog's name, maybe, you make a note on that he, is looking for a job, anything that you want to be able to reference. So the next time you talk to Frodo, you have in front of you the information you use to build that relationship and help grow that relationship. Notes for opportunities should generally just be tied to this transaction. You don't need to know which, inspector you used for this particular transaction within Frodo's contact, but if you want to pull up this opportunity note, you can kind of go through that process. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. To the right of this, we have timeline. So timeline, this is just going to be your history as we kind of do things within this opportunity. This is where it's going to track everything. Here you can see the moment I created it, the date and time, when information was added to the property, the date and time. So as we kind of go through this, this is just your timeline, your history of what's going on within the opportunity. So we're going to jump back into documents and let's talk about what we're doing here, right? This is where we're doing things for compliance purposes. So we have two major sections here. We have our start a transaction button, which we're going to talk about here in a second, but then we have our pick a checklist type option over here. So when we want to process compliance, we're going to drop this down and it's going to say, hey, what kind of transaction is this? Is it a residential? Is it a land? Is it a commercial deal? And depending upon what we select here, it will create our compliance checklist. Now, I want to be clear. Yours is probably going to look a little bit different. It may not say residential. It may say you may have additions for multifamily. What's in this checklist item and the checklist items contained within each checklist, this is curated and controlled by your MCA within your market center. So if you think that there's a checklist that should be there, or you have questions on particular checklist items as to what they are, those are going to be great questions for you to reach out to your MCA and your TL to ask about. If you want something added, or if you think an additional checklist needs to be created, this is something that they absolutely can do. So talk with them and work with them, and they may be able to create a new checklist if it makes sense for everyone in the market center. What I want to be clear about is you don't go to them and say, hey, I want a Josh checklist and a Susie checklist, right? Doesn't work that way, right? These are going to just be generic enough that everyone in the market center can use. So for our purposes, I'm going to click residential. And here you're going to see what we have, right? This is my listed residential checklist. Here are all the items that I need for compliance purposes when I want to start a listing, right? I want to accept the listing. I want to get this thing added into the MLS. I want all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. Here you can see some documents are in fact required and some are optional and some are conditional, right? Required are just that. Your market center has determined that before they can officially finish compliance and check off all the boxes, that these are all the things that you are going to need to make sure you provide to them. Optional typically are just that, optional, right? They're not required in any way. You can choose to use them or not use them depending upon the situation. For instance, in this market center, we have coming soon disclosure forms where we can talk to a seller, and if they want us to do a coming soon, the seller has to sign off on that so they understand the potential implications of that. Conditional are, basically required documents that if they meet a specific set of criteria, they are in fact required. So for instance, if you need a validation form, if it's listed in the Cincinnati MLS, right? They have a validation form that must be filled out and signed by the seller, where they basically approve everything that you've put within the property description, right? The seller has to sign off on that. Pretty simple. So now let's start talking about the transaction process, right? We've added a compliance checklist. How do we start a transaction? Well, depending on which transaction system you have set up, you're going to click the start a transaction option. If you have both Docusign and .loop tied to your command, you're going to get a choice. So pick which one is most appropriate. For us, we're going to do Docusign. If you only have one, for instance, if you only have Docusign connected to your command, then when you just click start a transaction, it's going to immediately take you into Docusign. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Docusign, and it is going to take us in. Now, since I have not logged into Docusign, I'm going to be prompted to log in once. So I haven't logged in all day today. Generally, Docusign will keep you logged in for about a 24-hour period. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to log in. And here you can see it's taking me directly into my Docusign room. And you'll notice the room name is in fact the opportunity name that I've created earlier. So we're not going to go full blown within Docusign, but we're going to kind of cover some of the basics that you kind of want to be aware of. So what we want to do first is we want to add some forms to our room, right? We need to fill out some forms that we can send off to our clients to sign. So to do that, we're going to click add in the upper right-hand corner here, and you're going to have a bunch of different options. Computer would be if you just want to upload something directly from your computer. Zip forms could be if you wanted to pull something from zip forms, if your MLS or your market center has that integration and they're using zip forms to fill out forms, right? And then, of course, these would just be links if you want to pull something directly from Google Drive, Dropbox, or Box, which no one uses Box. It's funny, it's still surviving. So for our purposes, we're going to do Docusign forms. So this is going to bring up our form selection window. Now, on the left-hand side, we have libraries. In addition, you may also see groups. So to give you an idea what the difference between libraries and groups are, libraries are going to be the list of documents provided by an MLS to Docusign to template out. So for instance, you can see that I have access to 3 different libraries. I have the Cincinnati MLS, the Columbus list forms, as well as the Dayton area board forms. So each one of these are different depending upon my needs, right? Depending upon what is, what we're trying to do, right? Groups would be specific groups of documents that your market center may have created. So here you can see my market center has not created groups, but groups, for instance, a group could be a listing packet, a buyer packet. This is where your market center has put together a group of the needed documents that you may need for a listing versus having to search through everything within the library. So for instance, here you can see for the Dayton area board, I have not only purchase documents, but I also have listing documents as well, right? So I kind of just want to point that out. If you do not have groups, definitely talk to your market center administrator, your MCA, and they have the ability to submit that request to get groups created. In addition, you may sometimes see a specific library for your market center. These are going to be market center specific documents that you may or may not need. For instance, here's a consumer guide to agency relationships. So for our purposes, let's go to the DABR. I haven't actually used any of these contracts in a while. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's select the exclusive right to sell in the exclusive agency contract. And let's just go ahead and add those. Now, of course, your Docusign room may look a little bit different. I have it in list view, but by default, a lot of times it's in the thumbnail view. So you can kind of, or the grid view as they refer to it. I prefer the list view because I like to just see information versus pictures. I'm more, function than form. At any point, you can always go back and you can add additional forms. So if I forgot to add my consumer guide to agency relationships, I can click that and I can add that as well. So pretty simple. You can see forms are forms because they're going to be labeled as such. One of the things to keep in mind when dealing with forms within Docusign, you cannot add multiple copies of the same form to a room. So said another way, if you were to delete this form, right? You're not gonna, you want to be careful because you can't just rename this. You can't just go and add another version of the contract. Forms by design are dynamic. You're just going to change the information of them You could convert them to PDFs to keep archived records of different documents or forms, but forms are kind of a one-shot deal when they come into the room. So just kind of keep that in mind. So for instance, if you were to archive one, you would need to unarchive it to be able to make changes to write another deal, especially if you're representing a buyer. Now, one of the cool things to keep in mind with forms is that since they are dynamic, they're tied to each other. So as you fill out information on one form, it will flow to other forms. But let's kind of jump into it. How do we fill out information on a form? It's as simple as just clicking on it. And now this is going to bring up the actual forms modal where Docusign will kind of allow us to go through this process and go line by line to start filling things out. So here you can see, since I've created the form or the transaction, I started it first within opportunities within command, it's already flowing some of that information over. So here you can see it's Frodo, right? It pulled Frodo's information. It's pulled my information over about my brokerage, right? It didn't pull over the address. So let's go ahead and let's type that in. So that looks like there might be a bug there. So I need to reach out the dot loop on that. But as we start to fill this out, right, you can start to plug this in and we'll just say date and so on and so forth, right? You can start to plug in this information. Actually, you know what, date goes here. This is like for a suite or whatever. We can start to plug in all this information, right? So just perfect. As we kind of go through, we can set our, terms of sale. We're going to list this at $450,000. We can kind of go through and see, what's the fee. Now, I'm not actually going to go through and fill out this whole thing. Because I currently am not licensed. And B, I want to be, respectful of everyone's time. To actually fill out every form would be a lot. But you can see you can check and uncheck boxes just as you were anywhere else. So once you're done filling out this particular contract, we can hit save and close. And then we can jump into the next one. So let's say we go into consumer guide to agency relationships, right? If there's some information we need to fill out within here. So what we can notice as we kind of go through this process, we get down to here, we can kind of start plugging in our address, right? Now this should have flown over, so there must be an issue with that DABR form. So we're going to go ahead and we'll save and close that. And then last but not least, we can jump into our exclusive agency contract as well. See if there's anything we need to fill out. Oh, you can see, so it's working in some cases because now it's starting to populate everything in, right? And if we need to make any adjustments to this. The thing to keep in mind when the way the dynamic forms work, that if I were to change the address here and say it's like, oh no, it's not 6055, it's 6056, it will then change that address anywhere that it's showing on any of the other forms. So kind of keep that in mind. All these fields are linked together. So we've gone through, we filled out our documents, right? We're feeling pretty good about it. How do we go about the process of getting them signatures, right? Well, I want you to pay attention to this little gray area right here that's empty. Watch what happens when I select one or more of the forms. We get some buttons. And we can select all the forms at once, and we can share these forms out to get signatures all at once. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of walk through those buttons. You have copy. Since these are forms, you really can't copy them. We could move them from one folder to the next if we were creating multiple folders. We have the ability to email. Now, email is not to get signatures. This would be to email copies of these as PDFs to whoever we want to receive them. Generally, you're never going to email copies of forms. You're going to email copies of signed documents. And there's a difference as we kind of go through that process. Combine would be if we have, say, multiple PDFs within our room and we want to combine them into one. We cannot combine forms. Forms are separate entities, but we can combine PDFs at our leisure if we have multiple documents that we just want in one giant packet. We do have the create envelope. The create envelope is the pen icon. This is what we're going to use to create the opportunity to send these forms out for signatures. So this is where we're going to go next. But to kind of finish it off real quick, we have archive. which would be to archive the item from the room. So we're not seeing it initially unless we select archive documents or all documents. This would be if we want to unarchive something, right? If you can hide it, you want to be able to unhide it. And delete would be to delete it entirely. So let's go ahead and let's jump into create an envelope, and we'll kind of walk through that process quickly. So when we create an envelope and we've selected our 3 documents, this is going to take us to the envelope section of Docusign rooms, right? So the first thing we're going to notice is the envelope name. So by default, it's always going to show please Docusign. This envelope name, only you will be able to see what this name is. But I always recommend you add some information to it, especially if you're representing a buyer. You may submit multiple offers with one single buyer, right? Every offer you submit is not going to get accepted. So I think for your own sanity that you identify what is contained within this envelope in case you need to go back and reference some of this information. So I'm going to do initial listing docs, and just so that way I can kind of identify it, and I'll kind of jump into the envelope section where you'll kind of see this a little bit later. Below this, you're going to see what is going to appear within the envelope. What are we sharing to our client? Here you can see it's the 3 forms that I selected. If I didn't mean to select one, I can easily close it out. I can hit the 3 little dots or the ellipses, if that makes sense to you, to remove them. I can even add more room docs, or even upload documents directly to this envelope if I want. The next section, this is going to be who am I sending this to, right? Add recipients to the envelope. So when I drop this down, it's going to give me 3 options. I have pre-tagged roles, I have room participants, and I have email addresses. Email addresses would literally just be if I want to type in the name and the email address of who's getting what. Room participants is going to show a list of everyone who's already a member of my room, and then I can select them. For 99% of the time when you're doing this, especially if you're using Docusign forms from an association, you're going to select pre-tagged roles, because this will automatically assign those important signature and initial fields to your client, so you don't have to do it on the next screen. So if I do pre-tagged roles, it's going to pull up a list and it's going to say, okay, here's a list of all the different roles we have, right? What are we doing here, right? So I can sit there and say, oh, you know what? Seller 1, I want this to be Frodo Baggins. Keep in mind, this is coming from opportunities, right? That's why it's important that we put in that email address when we created that contact. And when we generate that opportunity or this room from within opportunities in command, that is what then sends that information over. I could then, of course, select myself as the listing agent. And then I can always, the listing broker will just kind of leave blank for now. Now, buyer 1, it's because I selected consumer guide, but we'll just go ahead and we'll just throw him in as the consumer guide as well, or we can just leave him off if we didn't want to include that. We can hit add selected, and I can even remove consumer guide from it, right? Didn't mean to include that. Now that we've added a couple people here, I kind of want to quickly walk you through what we're seeing here. You're going to see the role, right? This is seller 1, and this is who it's assigned to. On the left-hand side, you can actually pick the order that these documents are going to be sent out. So let's say, for instance, I want Frodo to sign first, and then I want it to go to me as the listing agent. I would change that to a 2. So what will happen? Frodo will get notified first, and once he is successful in signing everything he needs, then those signed versions will come to me for me to sign. If we both are on one, we get them at the same time and we can sign them at the same time. So what's really cool about Docusign, you have some flexibility in the order people will get presented. So if you have a husband and wife and you share the one form to the husband and have him sign, maybe it's the lead-based paint disclosure, the property disclosure, whatever it is, you could have him sign it, and then it can go to the wife. so she can review what he has signed and then she can sign it. In addition to that, here is to the right, this is what we tell Docusign what role this person has as far as a permission level. Do they just need to sign it? Are they just looking to view it? Or are they just receiving a copy of it? Right? And then more, we're not going to dig too deep into this, but this is where you could actually, put a password into it if you wanted, that they would then have to enter a password before they could sign it as an added layer of security. Or if you wanted to add a specific message for Frodo on his emails that you didn't want to see anyone else, you don't want anyone else to see during this process. Pretty simple. Of course, you can always add additional recipients. So we could do an email address. And let's say we were writing an offer and we needed to send this to a lender. We could do 3, and then we could actually, plug in the lender's information and just say, just receive a copy, right? So in this case, if we were to do this, if this was, say, an offer, Frodo would sign it, the second party would then sign it, and then once both those parties have signed it, then the lender would get a copy of the signed document. Just kind of can make things easy. And if you accidentally add someone, it's simple enough, just hit the X on the right to close it. Now, down below, message to all recipients. We talked about how you can send a custom private message that will just show up on Frodo's email. Here is the message to everyone. So once again, the email subject is please Docusign. Everyone will see this email subject. I would always, cannot spell initial today. I would always customize this a little bit. You can even get rid of please Docusign, but just so that way, in the grand scheme of things, if you are sending multiple envelopes to your clients, especially your buyer, and they need to search for a specific one, it just doesn't always say please Docusign over and over and over and over. And of course, this would just be a message that everyone would receive. Please let me know if you have any questions, right? That simple. Envelope name up here is what you will see. Email subject down here is what they will see. And misspelled questions. Thank you, Grammarly, always making me look smart. We added some recipients. We added and removed some documents here. When we're ready, we can click next. If we're not ready to send this envelope, we can hit save and close and go back to it, add more documents if we want. But we're going to go ahead and click next. This is now going to take us into the e-signature portion of Docusign. So this is where you can add additional fields if you've uploaded flat PDFs, right? Forms are documents that already have the fields available. The check boxes already exist. The text boxes already exist. Signatures here, if you uploaded a flat PDF, here you could add initials and signature fields. Check boxes if you wanted to. So for instance, if we get down here and you're like, oh, I need a checkbox here, grab checkbox, click on it, and you can either double click it or click on it once, or wait, I should be able to double click on it to check it. If you accidentally add a field, you can delete it. One of the things to point out, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, we can see Frodo's fields are in yellow and Josh's fields, my fields, are in blue. So as we kind of scroll through here, we can see this is where Frodo is going to be requested to put his initials. Here's where he is going to be requested to sign, right? And even further down, you're going to see this is where I'm going to sign, and this is where he is going to sign. These are his fields. So if you want a specific checkbox that Frodo has the permission to check, when we drag it over, you'll notice over here, it's set for Frodo. If I switch it to Josh, you're going to notice it turns blue. So Frodo couldn't check this box, only I can. So it's kind of a handy little tip there. But as we kind of go through the process, we can make sure everything looks good. All the signature and initial fields are where they need to be. If at any given time we want to preview what this looks like, we can click recipient preview in the upper right-hand corner. And this is going to bring up the preview of what your client will in fact see. So here, we're viewing this as Frodo. And all he's going to have to do is click start. He's going to click where he needs to sign an initial, and it's just going to go through that process, right? Just that simple. Now you can see it's just plugging in a bogus signature. It's not saying Frodo's name, but you can kind of just see how it will kind of play out. And of course, you can view this on what it would look like on a tablet or a mobile phone if you want, just so you can kind of see that process, that it is mobile friendly for the most part, that they can kind of start and go through and sign. They do not have to have a Docusign account ahead of time. This functions if you're familiar with Dotloop or any other e-signature platform. It's just an email they'll get, they'll click, and we'll sign one live as Frodo, just so you can kind of see that process. Once you're comfortable with everything, right? You have everything filled out, all the signatures and everything looks good. We can go ahead and hit send in the upper right-hand corner. And now this is going to send that envelope. And now this is going to take us back into our Docusign room, right? So here it is. We were in documents. We selected all of these. That's how we then created our envelope, by clicking the little pin, right? And then if we go to envelopes, this is where we can see the status of what we've asked for. So once again, this is where it's important to identify the envelope name, right? Because this is where we can identify that these are the initial listing docs. Here we can see that we're still waiting for people to do what they need to do. We can make some corrections or resend it if they haven't received it yet. Or if it got lost in their spam, or if they accidentally deleted it, we can resend that email to them. So if we go ahead and we jump into the email, we can kind of jump in here, and this is the email Frodo will receive, right? So you can see that I have sent him some documents. Here's the little note I left in here. Here is the email subject. Once again, it's so important that the email subject just isn't please Docusign. So here Frodo can review the documents. It's going to say, hey, please review and act on these documents. It's going to have my information up here so he knows where it came from. He's going to agree. He's going to continue. He's going to start. And of course, he can at any point verify all this information. And then he's going to click. Now it's going to give him a couple different options on how to adopt his signature and initial. It's going to give him the option to change his name. So maybe he's, Dr. Frodo, right? Maybe he wants to change his initials, whatever it is, he can change that. He has the ability to change his style. So if he likes a different signature style, he can absolutely do that. He could draw it. So if he's on a mobile device, or if he's really good at using his mouse, he could, like try Dr. Frodo. I'm not even going to attempt that. Or if he has his signature on his computer already, he could upload it, which I think is weird. Someone would actually have their signature on their computer, but hey, you know what? Who am I to judge? I think most people will, in fact, just select a style, adopt an initial, and then he's just going to quickly go through and click wherever he needs to sign, and then click finish. And then at the end, it will prompt them and say, hey, would you like to create a free account? That way you can have a record of everything you signed, and you can also sign anything, and you can also have other people sign stuff and all this good stuff. We're going to go ahead and click no thanks, and now we're all done. So when we check us as the agent, we can check our email. We're going to see a couple different things, right? We're going to see Frodo viewed it, and once he signed it, now it came to me as the agent, right? Because I was number 2 in the spot. So now I can review those same documents, have the same options, right? Or this could be Frodo's wife or brother or whatever it is. And I'm going to go through and adopt that and sign and click finish. And it's going to say, hey, it's been saved. If you want to log in, I can. I don't want to, so I'm going to no thanks. And then at the end, we can see we're getting emails that everything has been completed. If we go and we check the envelope, sometimes this can take a few moments to update, but if we refresh it, it's still just going to take a few moments. So let's try refreshing it one more time for it to see that it's, oh, there we go. So you can see that it's been completed. So at one point, you can always kind of see who's holding you up in the chain, right? You could saw that it said it's needed my signature. It could be needed Susie's signature, needed Tim's signature. But once signed, if we go back into the documents, we're going to see some additional things here. The forms didn't change. What we see now is signed versions, PDF versions of those forms, right? So if we were to click on the exclusive right to sell, for instance, these are unchangeable flat PDFs, right, that are going to have Frodo's signature and my signature, right? That's what these are. You know, we could go, oh, it's the X in the upper right corner. We could go and change these forms and change the information on these forms and then share them out again. It's not going to change the signed version. These will not change. These are permanent. You could load them into the e-signature side and drop in boxes and things like that as if they were flat PDFs, but they do not have that dynamic capability where if you change the address on this form, it updates it on this form. Pretty simple. So that's kind of just the quick down and dirty of Docusign, right? Not that complicated. So let's talk about why is it so important then that we kind of started this transaction from within Command and from within Opportunities? Well, if I jump back, right, let me just go ahead and refresh this real quick. So we're in our documents and now we need to add some of our stuff to I lost my train of thought. Now we need to add our stuff to the compliance checklist. Well, we have two ways where we can do that, right, for submission. These are just checklist items. These are not the actual documents. These are the guides for us to add our documents. So if I click add a file over here, I have three options. I can manually upload it. So if I have it saved, maybe I'm old school and I did a wet signature and I scanned it in or took a picture of it, converted it to a PDF, whatever it is, I can upload that directly into that checklist item, right? That's browsing your computer, locating it, and then uploading it, right? You'll notice now I have this option called Docusign. If we started this with .loop, it would say .loop. If I click this, it is now going to show me a list of all the documents that are in my room that I can then sit there and say, oh yeah, here's my exclusive signed, right? You can see that it's highlighted as signed. I'm going to click this and I'm going to click assign. And now that is going to attach that file directly from that room or that loop to my compliance checklist. If I have tons of documents, if I have tons, so let me remove it. So let's say I have a list and I want to go individually. I can attach multiple files up here at the top. And I can say, oh, my exclusive right to sell. Let's go to Docusign. Now I can drop this down and I can say, oh, here's my exclusive right to sell signed, right? You know, let's just say I had the agency disclosure, right? So let's just go and we'll plug this in as well. And then once I have everything selected that I need, I'm going to click attach. It's going to attach those. And then I can submit this to the Market Center so my compliance coordinator will get notified that they have some compliance requests to verify. Now, I'm not going to do this because I'm tied to a real Market Center and they kind of get mad at me when I submit bogus stuff to them. So I hate to create more work for them. But they can review it. They can reject it. If you ever want to see what this is, you can click on it and it's going to pull it up at any given point. You know, you can view the history of it. You can see if you want to, if they've left any kind of review, like say, hey, you're missing a signature here, you can view that as well. So you have the ability to view all the documents you've uploaded, right? And you'll always have access to this once as long as you're with Keller Williams and you're in Command, you know, you'll just be able to go to the opportunity and pull up all those documents versus digging through a .loop or a Docusign room. At any given point, if you ever are needing to go back to your room, right, and say you've closed it when you're in the opportunity, you can always just click go to transaction. And this will take you immediately back to this particular Docusign room for you to create new forms, to get new signatures, to add more things within the compliance checklist. On the left-hand side, there are multiple checklist items. So here are all the ones for listed. And then once you're under contract, you'll click under contract and here are all the required forms for under contract. And then inevitably, once you close, here are all the forms and checklist items you can add for the closed section as well. You know, pretty simple. You know, you can truly see the value of making sure that you're starting that transaction from within the opportunities in Command. So let's talk about offers and commissions. So when we go into a situation, we have a situation where we have an accepted offer, right? This is the steps you need to take to notify your market center that you have an accepted offer, right? So from offers and commissions, we're going to click add new offer. And now it's going to ask us, what do we want to call it? Well, here's a good recommendation. If you're in a multiple offer situation, right? Once again, we have a default of initial offer. You may want to put who the agent is or who the client is. So let's say it's Bilbo Baggins is making an offer on our listing here on Shoal Road, right? You know, especially in a multiple offers, if you're going to use this to compare multiple offers, which I will kind of show you a setup of, a setup of that before the end of this class. I highly recommend you identify what each offer is, whether it's the offer on a specific property as a buyer or who is the buyer submitting multiple offers to you as a listing agent. So we'll go ahead and we'll create the offer. It's pretty basic. So it's going to show the date of the offer, which generally is going to be the day you hit the create button, could be in the past. And then you could foreclose or forecast, you know, what that close date is. So maybe it's June 30th. And then when we click parties, there's only a couple of required fields here. So here you can see it's filled in Frodo, his name, that's the only required field on this side, as well as my information. That's the only required field for the seller, right? The email is important for us. And then buyer, we just need to know, I don't know how you spell Bilbo. We're going to do that. We don't need any of this other information. If you know it, it doesn't hurt to provide it. And especially if he's pre-approved or pre-qualified, because this can play a part when you're doing some comparisons that I'll point out to you later. And then who is he being represented by? So we'll do Gandalf the Grey, right? You know, pretty simple. It's all you need. You don't need any of this other information. If you have it, feel free to plug it in, but it's not required. So then we're going to go ahead and click terms. So now terms is where you're going to kind of just give the nitty gritty of what the offer is, right? So these two values total here, you can't just put in it's 450,000, right? So maybe in this case, you know, Bilbo's going to offer 50,000 and then he's going to finance 400,000, right? That's how that total comes to play. You have to put in the cash or the finance. If he's not putting any cash into it, you can finance the entire amount. Earnest money would be, what was the earnest money? Was there an earnest money request of a certain amount or a percentage? Is it 3%? Is it 1%? Is it just $1,000 earnest money, depending on your marketplace? What makes the most sense within, you know, where you sell real estate? Your option fee is typically like a transaction fee. Is there a transaction fee that's associated with this? If you want to know more about including transaction fees, definitely talk to your TL within your market center. Your termination options, which is pretty straightforward. And then, you know, as the seller, is this buyer wanting us to contribute to like a home warranty? So they're saying, yeah, you know, $450 towards a home warranty. And do they need any help with closing cost, right? And then when you click the next button, agent analysis, this is where, and this is important, especially if you're going to be sharing multiple offers to your seller. This is where you can take the time to sit there and give your opinion of this particular offer, the pros, the cons, and just a summary of what you like or don't like or what you're concerned about. You do not have to fill this out. It's not required. I'll show you the value of it when the multiple offer situation, but we can go ahead and hit save. So once we've entered in our offer, we then have two options, right? We can edit the offer, you know, we add analysis, but we can basically accept or reject it, right? If our client, if, you know, Frodo is going to accept this offer from Bilbo, we hit accept. And now we know that this is now an open status, right? We've accepted this offer. Now we can change our response and basically say, no, we don't want to accept it. Or if we're good to move forward with it, we then can see we have an option here called manage commission. So manage commission, this is important and you're going to want to pay really close attention to this because this is where you make sure that you're getting paid the appropriate amount that you've agreed upon. So one of the things that I always really want to draw your attention to, if there's ever anything wrong with this screen, if there's an error, if something's missing, if something's not calculating right, it's going to showcase on the right-hand side here under the submit button. It's going to say, hey, we're missing the contract date, right? Oh, okay. So we'll edit the general information, right? Because you can see over here, we don't have the contract date. We can go in there and we can say, oh, you know what? It was accepted today. That's perfect. In addition, on this screen, let's say, because we hit save now, we're good to go, right? But now let's say, you know what? I didn't end up getting 3%. To try to get the deal done, I had to lower my commission to 2.5. So what I can do is edit this information and I can just change it to 2.5 and it's going to do the math for me. So now my total commission is going to be 11 grand versus what it was previously. 13.5, now it's 11.25, right? So if we hit save changes, it's starting to do that calculation. But you're going to notice it says, wait a minute, we have an excessive agent commission of $2,250, right? Well, that's where we can kind of come through and we can edit this payment information for the agent. So here you can see it's me. It's thinking that I'm still getting 13.5 because it's thinking of that 3%. But if I click calculate commission, now it's going to adjust it automatically for me. We're going to see, what am I going to pay in royalty? You know, what is the company's commission? Am I donating to Kid Care, KW Cares, Kids Cans, Bold Scholarship? Are there any additional things I need to do with this deal? So if I click add item, you know, did I do any kind of concession, right? Maybe I helped pay some of the bill out of my commission for their home warranty. Is there an outside referral that I need to send out to? Is there an inside referral within the Keller Williams world that I want to send to, right? You use inside referral if it's like another Keller Williams agent in a different market center. If it's an agent within your market center, you would just add them as another agent. But I just kind of want to point that out to you. We can hit save changes. So if it was like an inside, right, you could add another agent and it's going to show you a list of everyone within your market center that you could then do a split for. What's really cool about this, as you go through your transactions, you're going to see what everything broke down. You know, you're going to see what you're going to net, and then you'll see as you're getting closer and closer to filling the cap, whether it's the royalty cap or the market center cap, you'll slowly see as you get closer and closer to 100%. If for any reason you want to make any note or clarifications on what you are seeing or what you're submitting commission-wise, you can click add note, and this would just be a note that's going to be associated with this commission request. And then if you're good to go and you're ready, you're going to go ahead and hit submit. Once again, I'm not going to hit submit because this is tied to a real market center and I don't want to like bother them. But once we hit submit, this would then go to your MCA and they will know that there's a commission request that they can start the processing it. One of the questions we get a lot is, when should you do the offers and commissions? You know, some market centers, it's going to be dependent upon your market center. So you're going to want to talk to your MCA. In general, what you're going to want to make sure is some of them want you to submit an offer the moment you have an accepted offer, right? They want you to plug it in. Once it's accepted, do all the commissions and hit submit. And then if it changes later, change that information. Some market centers only want you to do it once you have that check in hand. So it depends upon how your market center functions. Talk to your MCA, talk to your TL, and they should be able to guide you. But it's a pretty simple process, right? So to kind of give you a quick rundown, what did we do, right? We created a contact. We then created a opportunity associated with that contact. We went into the details and we changed some information here. We selected our property, right? We went into the document section. We selected our appropriate checklist item. And then we created a transaction in our e-transaction platform of choice. We sent those documents out to our sellers, to our buyers to get signatures. We then used a command to bring those into our command checklist, compliance checklist, and then we submitted those to our market center. We created an offer. We accepted that offer. We added details about that offer. We then created the commission and made sure that the commission was accurate, and we submitted that to our market center so that they can start their process and making sure that they process the transaction correctly and we get our cut. Very, very simple, very, very quick. Obviously this could take, I would say days in a normal market, but this could all be done within a day possibly as well, with the way offers are getting written and accepted and people buying everything as quickly as it hits the market. But pretty simple process. Before we move on to anything else, are there any questions regarding this? Anything you want me to dive deeper into before I show you the multiple offer comparison? All right. So let's talk about what happens if you have multiple offers, and one of the really cool things within Command, and something each one of you should definitely take note of. So if we're in a multiple offer situation, so let's say here we have, I have a listing, Heritage Park, and I believe I have 3 different offers under here. So I received 3 offers from John Buyer and his agent Mary, Betty Buyer and her agent Susie, and Bobby Buyer and his agent Walter. I went through and I added the process, or added each commission to Command. Now, what's really cool about doing this, and one of the things you want to build a process, and you always want to make sure, especially in the market we have now, you want to make sure that you are being as unbiased as possible when presenting offers, because some people are getting upset when their offer doesn't get accepted. And we've seen some litigation happen across the country where buyers like, well, they must have not submitted my offer correctly because they should have accepted my offer because it was more money, or it was this, or it was that, right? So you want to always make sure that you have that process in place that is provable to you to then display this information to your client. So if you take the time and you plug in all the different buyer or all the different offers, you'll notice we have check boxes to the left of each one. And when we select one or more of these boxes, or when we select multiple boxes, we have this option up here called compare offers. So if I select all 3 of these boxes, right, all 3 of these offers, and I click compare offers, it's going to pull up a side-by-side comparison of the actual offer itself. So here we're going to see what the sale price is. We're going to see what the cash is, the finance amount. Was there earnest money taken? Was there any transaction fee associated? What was the termination notice? What was the date of the offer? What is the expected closing date? And then we can even further down here, we can see were they pre-qualified, pre-approved, right? When we were creating the offer, there were those check boxes we could check. Are they pre-approved, pre-qualified? That shows up here. But right here in the middle, summary, pros, cons. If you as the agent take the time to plug in the pros and the cons, and maybe even give a quick summary of what your thoughts are on this offer, we can then take this and email it to your client. So if everything looks good here, you can email your offer comparison. It's going to send it to the client's email, right? We have 3 offers, right? You can change the subject and the message if you want. You can even send yourself a copy. But to show you a preview of what it looks like, it's going to be branded you. And it's going to show the 3 offers to your client. And if they click compare offers, it's going to be that side-by-side comparison that we saw on the previous screen. And here you can see where I filled in like, hey, they do not need to sell to buy, but they need higher closing cost assistance, right? Here, Betty, she does not need you to contribute to closing costs, but she has to sell before she can buy this, right? So here we have John. Hey, it's an all cash offer, no closing costs. But not only is it lower than what we're price selling it for, but he needs a longer closing date as well. So you can then send this to your client and then pick up the phone and go through the offers together one step by step so that they can make the best informed decision. And then you are showcasing all of the offers in an equal footing. What's great about this is it's not you just talking over the phone. They have something in front of you that you can kind of talk through with them. And what's even better about this, especially in those situations where you're getting so many offers, sometimes you're getting 5, 10, 7, 8, 12, 30 offers. on a single property, if you take the time to plug each one in and then review that offer and plug in your pros and cons, if your client later has a question about a specific offer, you don't have to go back and dig through the contract and find that email, right? You can go through and you're keeping these offers up to date and you're seeing these quick and easy summaries of what's going on. And you're able to showcase and send that to your client. So hopefully you see some value in that. I really hope you do, because that is a huge thing that you definitely need to make sure that you're presenting all offers in an equal light to prevent any questions being arise as to why someone got an offer accepted over someone else. Right, you can't control who your what offer your client accepts, but you can control the way you present the information in an unbiased form. Any questions on that? Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And this is my moment where I kind of just give the general, like, hey, are there any questions, concerns, criticisms, compliments? Hopefully you guys saw value in this hour-ish and 15 minutes of time we've spent this afternoon. Well, if there are no questions at all, I did record this session and we're going to get it posted on our regional YouTube channel. So ask your MCA and your TL for that information, or you can search YouTube for Keller Williams, Ohio Valley region if you want to view this recording. Typically takes about 3-4 days to a week to get these posted. So feel free to take advantage of that. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to your Market Center tech trainers. Beyond that, thank you so much for your time. Take care. I'm glad it was helpful, Malia. Bye.